Now, I'm very happy to introduce Mrs. Archita Faustmann. She's an advocacy advisor and human rights specialist at the non-profit development corporation NGO Helvetas in Switzerland. And she is one of the experts on business and human rights questions. It's great to have you here, Archita. I see you on the screen already, and the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much for having me. We all heard that also in the keynote that how the tourism industry is hit by the current crisis. And we also talk about that how crisis recovery should also kind of be built on more sustainable way. And this is where also the ongoing debates on business and human rights comes into the picture. I'm delighted to present a general overview in 10 minutes, and I hope I can do the justice to the topic. As we all know, increasing worldwide actions on business and human rights has its origin in the adoption of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. The UNGP provides for 31 principles.
Excuse me, Archita, just 1 second. Could you go on full screen with your presentation so we can if you go on slideshow in the middle, yeah, there we go. Great.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. So the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, these are 31 principles altogether. And these guiding principles are based on 3 pillars. One is the state duty to protect. Second is corporate responsibility to respect. And the third is access to remedy. At the heart of this UNGP is the process of human rights due diligence, which companies are advised to follow to reduce and prevent adverse human rights impacts on people, communities, and environment. All state actions, as well as actions of private sector, civil society, have human rights due diligence as a central reference point when they talk about business and human rights. And the UNGP principles are also adapted in original human rights instruments. The OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises is one such example. Now, after the governments endorsed the UNGPs, the UN Human Rights Council mandated the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights to engage with governments to implement the UNGP framework within their own jurisdictions and regulate actions of businesses that operate within their territories. To this effect, the working group has formulated an advisory providing guidance to states on development, implementation, and update of national action plans. The ideal national action plan, according to the working group, involves a 5-stage process, which consists of 15 concrete steps, of which phases 1 to 3 describe development of an initial national action plan. Phases 4 and 5 include the continuous cycle of implementation, monitoring, and update of successive versions of the NAP. Now, here. The working group put emphasis on these 4 underlying principles for an effective NAP. And at the heart of these 4 is addressing or priorities in addressing adverse impacts. What it means in reality is best described in the words of working group, which says, governments should draw on the guiding principles directed at states in pillars 1 and 3 when defining their strategy and concrete measures to address adverse human rights impacts. And when detailing their measures, government should also refer to the guiding principle addressing the corporate responsibility to respect under pillars 2 and 3. Now, in particular, they should promote the concept of human rights due diligence as the thread ensuring coherence in all government activities. An increasing number of states from various continents have started to engage in NAP processes. I hope you can see all these countries here, right? Yeah. So increasing number of states have started to engage in NAP processes, whilst others have indicated their intentions to do so. The first group of states publish their NAP processes, whilst others have indicated their intentions to do so. Um, so first group published their NAPs in 2013 and 2014, first ones being UK, Netherlands, Denmark, and Finland. And as of now, 23 states have produced an NAP. 24 states have begun the process of developing an NAP or have committed to developing one. 6 states in which either the National Human Rights Institute or civil society have begun steps in the development of an NAP. More and more European countries now have regulations that require companies to publicly report on their human rights practices. Almost all European states, the USA, Canada, but also countries such as Colombia, Chile, and Thailand have already developed national action plans for business and human rights. Many other states, Mexico, Argentina, Kenya, India, and some Pacific states are in the process of developing such plans. Now I would touch upon a few or brief overview of some selected NAPs that have an impact on key human rights issues, which are the key human rights issues affecting tourism sector that are listed at the bottom of the slide. And these NAPs are also relevant for tourism sector. First is the enactment of UK Modern Slavery Act 2015, a part of UK government's NAP. Under this act, a commercial organization has to outline steps it has taken during financial year to eliminate slavery, in human rights language forced labor, and human trafficking in its operations and in its supply chains. An independent slavery commissioner appointed by the Secretary of State oversees the effectiveness of this act. Then we have the French duty of vigilance law, which was adopted in 2017 and requires large French companies to establish and publish a vigilance plan with measures to identify risk and prevent serious harms to environment and human rights linked to their own activities as well as their subsidiary supply chain and subcontractors. The law establishes civil liability for harms resulting from a company's failure to observe its duty of vigilance. Third is the Dutch Child Labor Due Diligence Act that applies to all companies that sell or supply goods or services to Dutch consumers, no matter where the company is based or registered, with no exemptions for legal form or size. Companies that fail to exercise child labor due diligence are subject to potential financial and legal enforcement actions, including multiple years of imprisonment. Although this act is likely to enter into force around 2022, but may already be relevant to companies that fall within the scope of this act. Fourth is the Swiss National Action Plan. In its current form, it provides for due diligence regulation in conflict minerals and due diligence with regard to child labor. The ongoing contentious issue by the civil society with regard to the Swiss National Action Plan is that the Swiss National Action Plan relies heavily on non-financial reporting rather than the legal liability for business-related human rights violations. Moving from the European jurisdiction, Thailand is the first country in Asia to have a national action plan on business and human rights. The key content of NAP, which consists of action plan on labor, action plan on community, land, natural resources, and the environment, action plan on human rights defenders, and action plan on cross-border investments and multinational enterprises. Two of the proposed activities in the Thai National Action Plan are relevant for the EU companies. First is a plan study to consider tax incentives and other benefits to encourage business sector to follow the UNGP. And second is the consideration of creating measures to task business sector to conduct human rights due diligence reporting. When we talk about the overview of business and human rights actions worldwide, last 2 years has also seen the development, especially in Europe, in leaning towards the mandatory human rights due diligence in government actions. We've seen this in the actions of governments of UK, France, Netherlands, and recently on 29th April 2020, the European Commissioner for Justice, Didier Reynders, announced that he will introduce legislation on mandatory sustainable due diligence for companies as part of the Commission's 2021 work plan and the European Green Deal. The legislation which the Commission will frame as part of the Green New Deal and its plan to achieve carbon neutrality is set to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for human rights abuses and environmental damage linked to corporate operations, subsidiaries, or value chains. On this front, Germany is currently working on a mandatory human rights due diligence law that would oblige large German companies to take appropriate measures to prevent human rights violations in their business activities and supply chains. If companies fail to comply with the law, they may face civil liability for damages and risk actions. Similarly, in Denmark, in January 2019, three political parties put forward a parliamentary motion requesting the government to develop a legislative proposal on mandatory human rights due diligence and corporate liability with the support of over 100 civil society organizations, the Trade Union Confederation, the Danish Consumer Council, and some businesses. Also in Switzerland now, we will have to watch how the referendum on the Responsible Business Initiative, emphasizing on civil liability for companies, would be voted by the Swiss people. So now we see, or currently the momentum on business and human rights is building up on all fronts. There is no going back on this, and conducting human rights due diligence and impact assessment is continuously becoming an integral part of conducting business worldwide, and it will only strengthen in coming years. I hope with this I've given an overview which is easy to understand, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Archita. It was very interesting to see that the momentum is still here. Actually, just one short follow-up question. You think that COVID-19 hasn't brought all these initiatives to a halt or slowed down at least?
Actually, there is also currently ongoing debate that with the COVID-19 debate, the initiative should actually even strengthen or build back stronger and more sustainable. And to this, also in the previous question, I also understood that the question, people are, that there is also a question on how to build back strongly. So the UNDP has also come up with a human rights due diligence process, which is also takes into the considerations of human rights specific to the crisis situation.
Okay.